A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And as you can tell, the name of this session is Family is Everything. It implies not just about family business and getting into family business when you as a member of the family grow up and get into business, but it implies the fact that today as individuals, as members of a family, there is so much support, so much fabric of family businesses have changed in the last few years. I remember talking to, as I would like to put it, more senior entrepreneurs and the last gen sort of family entrepreneurs. For them, it was just a matter of joining an existing family business, and probably you could do something new as you go along the way once you were sitting on the big seat. But today, the whole family structure of the business is about getting innovative. It's about trying to find something that is more creative in an existing business. And probably just, I mean, there is already a business in existence. It's probably doing well. It's very professionally managed. And the idea is to be able to do and find our own creativity in an existing business, and also at the same time try to do something new with it. So we've got three lovely entrepreneurs here who are also part of the family business setup. But at the same time, they found their own creative self within that business and tried to do something new, which has not just created value for their existing businesses, but also created value for the society. They've brought something new into the stable of their own family business and would probably be very different entrepreneurs who are also part of a family business setup. So welcome to all three of you. And as we go along, we're going to sort of trying to understand over here, so I was telling them backstage when I was talking to them individually that they may not realize, but they're all such creative entrepreneurs, and some of their businesses are also not that creative, maybe not, but their whole sort of individuality as an entrepreneur is extremely creative and very design thinking to a business. So Varun, let me start with you. What I would like to, and as an entrepreneur media, we like to call all of you a millennial entrepreneur. And in that sense, your approach to business, your approach to life, your approach to a family enterprise is very different to probably what we have ourselves written about earlier. Now, I understand that at CG Corp Global, you've taken up an important chunk of the business, which is the YY Noodles, which was probably at one point of time one of the businesses of the family, and you made it one of the most important businesses of the family. Now, what is it that you as an entrepreneur see yourself doing differently with YY, which was not existing there, and why did you feel the need to do this?
Okay, thank you, Ritu, for having me over here, first of all. Let me just give a brief background about the group. We are a group with about 140 years of history and legacy. So I am literally in this cusp of the exponential growth where I joined the group about 10 to 12 years back, where I have been brought up in the traditional format of the family business, which is manufacturing, which is financial services, real estate, education. And coming to the current scenario in terms of how the businesses are done, it's completely opposite. So we have, as a group, also departed from just the usual way of manufacturing and now coming into the more digital and innovative side of doing business. Now, let's say back then when I joined business, it was a complete top-down approach. So things like approach and the style of doing businesses is changing in the group. So I'm trying to youthify the group, so to speak. I'm bringing in much younger talent. I'm bringing in a more flatter and a lean organization. I'm bringing in, guys, people who are below 30, 35, who have tremendous multitasking skills. So with this skill set put together, we are trying to take YY to the new level. Sure. And when I say new level, we've just started a concept which brings YY even more closer to the customers. So our interaction with the customers is happening at a very intimate level. The novel concept which we've come up with is YY City, and I thank Gaurav for this. It's a first of its kind in India. It's a noodle bar concept, and we hope that we are able to scale this up with the team and with the brand that we have.
No, I think that's a marvelous thought and a large thinking at your end with your entrepreneurial vision to see something which was part of the family stable to grow large. So thank you for that. Manasi, I'm going to come to you. You're a single child, so obviously your responsibility is even higher when it comes to the family. But one thing I like to know, both as a woman as well as the single child of a large family business, were you ever pressured to feel that, you know, there was sort of too much on your shoulders even at a young age? And at the same time, how did you sort of, you've started this beautiful venture to help young children and underprivileged children with caring with colors. How were you able to find that individuality? You know, it's not just your own parents when you're talking about a family or a family business, but there's just, and when you're part of a huge family business structure and, you know, you're up there when it comes to a business brand value, there's just so much expectation out of you. There's just so much pressures that you know, sort of face in the head all the time. How did you find your creative side? How did you think that this was what you wanted to do?
Thank you for having me here today, Ritu. I think, so I've been a painter since birth. And I think painters are very special people because they're very sensitive to the environment and they have a lot of courage. Because when you paint and when you're creating an image, you're actually voicing an opinion, and sometimes it can be a very strong opinion, and that takes a lot of courage. So I think there is a lot of, I did feel a lot of pressure when I first joined, and I feel it more now because I think there's a lot of expectations, especially when you're a fifth generation in a family business. But because I'm a painter, I think my need to diversify and my need to break out and come into my own is very high. And I think I'm able to cope with working in the existing family businesses, understanding the core competencies, because I'm not an engineer, I studied painting, trying to approach things in a very creative way. So we manufacture cars, the Innova, Etios, etc. And I like to look at it as making sculptures. So when I first started training on the shop floor, I thought, okay, thought to myself, I'm not an engineer, but how can I make this interesting for myself? And I thought the entire process, the assembly line, right from the welding to the assembly line to the finish to the paint, was very, very creative, very beautifully done, a lot of skill required to make a piece like a car, a final unit of a car. And I thought to myself, this is like making a sculpture that transports people from point A to point B, and not just transporting them, it transports their senses. You experience things when you're in a car, and those moments can be very, very memorable. And that is a great process for me to relate to in terms of painting, because a painting takes you through experiences. When you look at a piece of art, a sculpture, an installation, I think it moves you somewhere. And it can be a very emotional feeling, and I think making cars and the experience of riding in a car is just as moving. So that's how I approach the core businesses and the manufacturing. And at the same time, I started teaching at government schools when I was 14, and I was very, very inspired by the children because they were so happy and they were just always laughing in spite of the, the harsh environments that they live in. And that's when I decided that I have to do something to give back. I have to do something to improve and touch the lives of these kids, which is how Caring with Color started.
Sure. And as a young entrepreneur, how do you approach Caring with Colors? And do you see it becoming like a global venture? Do you also see yourself going into emerging countries where there are a lot of underprivileged children and you could do a lot more for them? What is your vision for Caring with Colors?
My vision is first to start in Bangalore because, obviously I'm Indian and I want to do something to improve the lives of people in India. But I'm looking at it more as it's a movement. And the idea of Caring with Color is to change the educational paradigm in India and to create pedagogy that involves the arts. So we're trying to develop content in which maths could be taught through music, various concepts in science can be taught through dance and movement. A lot of geometry could be taught through visual art. And I also wrote a textbook when I was 21 called It's to Develop Critical Thinking Skills Through Visual Art Classes. So the idea is I want to start a movement, which I think has already started in different pockets of the world, to include the arts and to change the way we approach education. I strongly believe that education has to be a process of experience and discovery. You know, discovering concepts, discovering what a center of gravity is, as opposed to sitting in a classroom and having a teacher write something on the board and, you know, make it a very like lecture-based learning process, which I don't think works.
So I would say that in one sense, you've actually put your entire family business into another new industry, which is education. And that's really, you know, it's a good thing because there's a huge lot of potential that exists in an industry like education. Depends upon which side you look at it, but the potential is really huge. So thank you very much for that, Manasi. Viraj, I'm going to come to you. You know, at your tender age, I realized you've already done about 6 years of entrepreneurship. First with, you spent about 4 years in the core business, which is Kalyani Forgings, and now you started your own Kalyani Studio. So what was it that sort of, after finishing your studies, drove you to go to Kalyani Forgings, and what was it that you thought that you wanted to change? And at some point of time, I'm sure when you were part of, and you've about 4 years you were there with Kalyani Forgings, and you still are, of course, needless to say. But what was it that sort of, when you were working within Kalyani Forgings, you felt that you needed to change? You needed to sort of do the new. And how did it go about happening?
All right. So it's a sort of inspiration or source of inspiration that goes a long way back, right from childhood, when from my grandparents and family members, they've always encouraged me to take interest in the business and also take interest in sort of the sciences and physics and things like that. My mom used to always, she cared about my mathematics score a lot and beat me up if I didn't do well. But before that, I mean, going back to college, I always wanted to start some new business based on a new technology. And at that point, I was very interested in solar energy. And I was going to start a business in solar. It was called Kalyani Solar at that time. And I discussed this with my mother. And interestingly, her reaction was that, what are you doing with solar energy? There's no technology there. You should look at forgings. There's so much technology. And at that point, I didn't agree with her because I was thinking, this is a completely new field. And what are you saying? It doesn't make sense. But today, with the benefit of hindsight, I could see that she was talking about how it would be rapidly commoditized. And whereas you got to give importance to things that on the technology side of the business, even if it's solar or forgings or any industry. So that's how I dived into forgings, and technology has been a very core value in our family. That's what I have grown up with. There's of course other value systems like entrepreneurship and work ethic and things like that, which is common across many family businesses, but and that is kind of like table stakes if you want to be a part of that. But what's unique has been the technology aspect. I've been in a family of technologists. I've seen my uncle talk in Berlin at the International Forging Congress, where people from all over the world came to watch him talk about the future of forging technology and where that industry is going. So it was a really proud moment for me to see that this is what we value in our family. And that's how I started thinking a lot about technology from a very young age and throughout my time in Kalyani Forge as well. So while I was working in Kalyani Forge, I had defined some core values there, one of them being entrepreneurship. The others were teamwork, integrity, and similar values. But entrepreneurship was a core value which I was trying to drive while culturally transforming the business. And while I was interacting with many clients, with people in the industry, of course, there were a lot of needs and gaps which I could identify that were not being met, and which eventually would be something I would do in Kalyani Studio. But another trigger was this value of entrepreneurship. I felt like unless I, as a leader, can demonstrate entrepreneurship to the team, to the entire company, there's no point in having that as a value, on the board. So that was something I kept in mind. And when I realized it was the right time to to incubate a new idea around high strength engineering, that's how I came in to start Kalyani Studio.
Sure. And now this is very interesting that, as probably even from your very young age, one thing that you may have noticed about your family was that, there was a huge hunger to grow and to bring scale into whatever that you were doing. So how do you approach scale? I mean, considering that you've all, in one sense, gone into very entrepreneurial ventures, even within the regime of family business, how do you now approach scale, and how do you sort of want to build sustainability into that venture? And I mean, how do you sort of see it becoming very, very large? And I'm quite sure the idea is to do it in very short time too. Yep. So what are your ambitious plans about your individual ventures? And how do you approach it? I mean, how do you see the scale that you might have learned, or your understanding of building scale in a business, to how you're going to now build it in your existing enterprise?
Sure. So let me again talk about YY, because that's more pertinent to the given environment. We do about 2.3 billion packets a year.
Wow.
And we do it in about 35 countries. We are pan-India manufacturing. So the brand is already there. It's all about how we nurture the brand and how we take it forward.
Sure.
Now for me, innovation without scale is unsustainable. When we talk about the brand, we think big. That sky is not the limit, but it's just the beginning. So with this new concept that we have, we're looking at probably creating 1,000 to 1,500 new entrepreneurs. Now it's the format which we've created. Anyone can start up a YY city with maybe a 5 lakh rupees all the way up to 20 lakhs, 25 lakhs.
Sure.
So we are giving every single aspirant or an ambitious person to become his own boss.
Right. So the idea is to...
And we have the whole know-how, the knowledge, the operating know-how, the marketing, because we are backing everyone with our brand.
Right.
So even now, what our forefathers have kind of created, it's irreplaceable. We can't discount that. And that is something which we are fully aware of.
Sure. So for you, I mean, if there is no scale, then it's not exciting enough.
Absolutely. Like coming from a small country like Nepal,
Right.
I think we have made a significant impact, at least in the noodle market, because we produce about 3% of the total world noodle manufacturing.
Yeah.
And we are taking this all over the world now.
That's super. So Manasi, I'll come to you. I mean, how do you see caring with colors becoming an enterprise and becoming a self-sustaining enterprise of its own? Because I'm sure 5 years down the line, you might have some other interests, but caring with colors will sort of find its own way and its own path to grow. And today, of course, even while we are entrepreneurial, I find that maybe a few years down the line, we want to do new things. There's something else that catches our attention. And it's not a bad thing at all. It's, in fact, a very good thing, because there's just so many fundamental meta problems that exist in the country that Ananya was actually talking about a while back. And something is going to catch your eye, and there's some opportunity that you're going to be able to identify there. So how do you want to build the scale and yet let it be a very independent organization, independent of you, not calling you 10 years later to say that, because I moved out, it fell apart?
Like Varun said, scale is very, very important, especially in a country like India, and especially for a project like Caring with Color. We work with government schools, and over 85% of the Indian school-going population attend government schools. And the idea is for us to create innovators and to create more entrepreneurs. And that can only happen if there's a systematic change in the system of education. And when it comes to scale, yes, I want it to be a pan-India movement. I want to touch the lives of children pan-India and create a sustainable and a very bright future for our country in like the next 10, 20, 30 years for the country to be sustainable. As for Caring with Color to slowly become independent of me, yes, it's already very professionally run. I have a chief operating officer who runs operations. We're only 2 months old, so I am very involved right now. I also work at the current family businesses at the same time. But definitely, I think even 3 years down the line, the startup has to be on its own. It has to be self-sustainable. It has to be able to raise funds. It's a non-profit organization. I would be helping in the fundraising and creating strategy for that, but it's not going to be my day-to-day work. And I already have about 5 other things that have caught my attention, and I want to start 5 more things. And most of it's related to the country, and most of them have some sort of philanthropy angle to it, because I think our country has so much to offer, and there's so much lacking to support a lot of talent that this country has. And hopefully, through my various ventures and the other ideas I have now, I will be able to change and touch the lives of a lot of people and create a brighter future for this country.
Sure. Viraj, just to sort of get an understanding now, you know what happens is when you're in you've particularly worked 4 or 5 years in Kalyani Forgings, and then you've now sort of moved out of an active role in Kalyani Forgings to Kalyani Studio. Do you ever feel that, that there are too many people inclusively within the organization who think that, you're doing something which is very frivolous or whimsical, might not, and do you feel some pressured by it? Because, it's about proving a point when you go into a new enterprise and a new entrepreneurial venture. And I'm sure your own sort of belief in it could be very strong. But first of all, and I mean, the world will believe in its own time. But first of all, getting your own sort of people, you have 1,000 people organization, and they wanting to believe taking your vision. Do you find it difficult? And then scaling it up further, there's those 1,000 people whom you have to make believe, and then the new set of people in this new company that you have to make believe. How does it sort of all work out together first in your mind to say that, to hell with it, and I'm going to sort of go out there and do it?
Well, so surprisingly, it's not been such a difficult transition or initiative, even in terms of people's reactions to it. I've, for the most part, received a tremendous amount of encouragement from my family and the people at work. Of course, today I'm not involved hands-on at Kalyani Forge in the day-to-day affairs. I focus more on strategic and board level activities. But even there, I've got a lot of encouragement in terms of the idea, because they realize that this is the future, and somebody needs to be working on the future. Even in terms of at Kalyani Studio as well, right from day one, my team has been extremely dynamic and supporting. They've stuck true to the vision. We've had a lot of debates on what the vision should be, and I tend to be quite stringent with that in terms of not compromising on it. But that's where we have a lot of open discussion. I encourage my team to challenge me if I have a wrong assumption or something like that. And I've learned a lot from them and evolved and refined this vision of high-strength engineering and design. So it's actually surprisingly been like a natural progression.
Sure. So let me put it this way to all of you. You have huge sort of second names to, or your surname to sort of prove. And everything that you sort of put your surname with automatically requires a huge amount of success to be attached to it. Everybody thinks that since Kalyani Forgings is a huge success, Kalyani Studio would be an even bigger success. Same goes for Caring with Colors, which is coming from the Kirloskar stable. Now, given that, how is it that you design your enterprises to make sure, and I mean, what sort of preparation do you do at your own level to make sure that the success sort of continues? And at some point of time, that the whole struggle for failure is anyway big. But in your case, it's probably even bigger. At least one would always have it at the back of their own mind. Now, how do you sort of leave that all behind and say that, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to tread further?
I think passion is most important. You have to be, especially for an entrepreneur, you have to be so passionate, because I think the entire business and the growth of the business rides on passion. There's going to be so many challenges, so many obstacles, a lot of people getting in your way, a lot of people having very, very high expectations of you. And passion and drive is and motivation is self-motivation, because no one else can tell you to be successful. You have to have it. It has to be in your heart. And I think that's the key, that's key to the success of anything. And I also think it's important to fail. I've failed many times. I've hit rock bottom, and I think it's those experiences that have taught me the most. And I'm also very stubborn. I don't like listening to my parents. When you're in a family business, you always have your parents giving you a lot of guidance and a lot of inputs, but honestly, I hate that. My dad says I'm exactly like him, how he was when he was at my age. But I want to be given the freedom to fail. And I have failed, and I think I've only succeeded because of those failures. So I think failure shouldn't be restricting you, and it shouldn't be a point of fear. I think you should look forward to failures and look forward to obstacles.
What's your thought on it?
Okay, let me digress a bit. There's a saying that the first generation builds it, the second generation takes it forward, and the third generation destroys it. So, yeah, I'm the third generation. So we are living in this constant challenge that let's prove this theory of generation wrong.
Yeah, you're basically trying to prove a theory wrong.
Exactly, I'm trying to prove. So I think the most important thing is you need to have discipline. That's the first and foremost thing. Second thing is time management. And third thing is team building. And me at my group, that's exactly what I'm working on.
No, I think that's a pretty wise thought.
Just another thing to add, extrapolating from Manasi's point about you don't have anybody who's going to check on you. So it demands a lot more self-discipline as a founder in this sort of situation, because you're responsible whole and soul for your own success and failure. So you got to take that in your stride. And even if you have this legacy of your family business, of whatever size it may be, I think you should take the advantage of the fact that you can see what a large business looks like, or you may have seen from close quarters, and you're currently growing a newborn baby or something like that. So if you know what the future looks like, at least some aspects of it, you can start preparing, putting the building blocks together in terms of the culture, the systems. Maybe you want to do it differently. Maybe you want to do some of the same things. So it's not necessarily very daunting. You should not look at it as a very daunting thing, but make the most of it.
Also, to add to this idea of discipline, which I think is very important, I think discipline is defined differently for each person. You kind of, the way each individual or each of us conduct our new ventures would be very, very different. And I think the binding force behind all of this is passion and courage. Sure. So.
Just to add to all this, we at our age, irrespective of, we may be called overly innovative, what we really need is a mentorship. So that's something which our fathers constantly provide. Otherwise, even we'll go completely out of track. My father at times thinks I'm whimsical. I come up with a new idea every day. So, that's where he is to
sort of put
tell
it
me,
in check.
Yeah, that just relax, Let's focus on growing what our existing priorities are.
Sure.
So priority is another thing which we should be very aware of.
Sure. And what sort of, in your new enterprises, what sort of value systems have you brought from your from the existing businesses, and what new value systems is it that you're creating? So I think you very well addressed that entrepreneurship was what you brought from Kalyani Forgings, and then you brought new pioneering design and thinking. But I would really like both of you to sort of give it a go in terms of what value systems have you picked up from your existing current businesses into your new businesses.
The most important value is ethics and corporate governance. I think that because everyone is in such a, we feel like we're in a race and we want to scale up and achieve success very, very quickly. And sometimes you can, in this process, compromise ethics, honesty, and trust, and corporate governance. And I think these 4 values to me are very, very important. And I don't think that any business can or should function without these 4 core values.
Sure.
I would say trust is very important. Honesty, because in today's world, you just Google anything and you've got the whole Janam Patri, the whole birth certificate of anything you do there.
That's
so
true.
The people who are dealing with these days, they're not fools. They exactly know what's going on. And it's all about maintaining the legacy.
Right.
We need to pass on as well.
Sure. Well, that's a good thought. You want to add to this?
Yeah, just a nuance on the values. I mean, I think it doesn't matter what those 4 or 5 values you define, but the fact that you define them is very important, because then that puts in a lock that these are the values that we are going to live by. Apart from that, I mean, you may not take the same exact values, like some of the things like integrity, teamwork are universal and you would use them across, but going from one business to another, you may want to modify the values. Like what I did with Kalyani Studio is entrepreneurship was not a value that I would use in a startup, because by nature it is entrepreneurial. So we changed that to passion and pioneering as 2 values, which takes entrepreneurship to the next stage.
Sure. At this stage, I'm also going to open questions to our audience. If we could please have some house lights on, please. But in the meantime, I'm also going to ask you this, like to see some show of hands over there. You know, in your creative enterprises, one thing that you would always be challenged, and this is my belief, is by talent. You know, Viraj, you've got, I mean, you're trying to probably, you know, do what Germany does best. So in India, I don't understand if there is actually a big creative culture that has been ingrained into us. We can be creative in our heads, but it's not been ingrained in our educational system, not even in our family systems. We're not that creative as a country. And your businesses, by far, are very, very creative. Now, how do you sort of address the talent gap that you would like, you know, your talent to be X? And if you were probably trying to do the same business in Europe or US, you would find your lives were going to be much easier than they're here in India. But then I think that is also a sort of excitement by itself. So how do you address the talent gap in your new enterprise?
So the talent is a very core and critical part of starting this business. And firstly, I don't believe there's a talent gap, because I like to think contrarian to general assumptions. And I'll explain that. It's the purpose that we've defined, 2 purposes for this company. One is to create new high technology jobs. And the second is to create homegrown technologies in India around high strength. So it's only if you create the jobs, high-tech jobs, will you get the output of technologies. So our whole idea of addressing talent is around addressing the job design, the role profile of jobs. And you can't blame the individual from whatever background or education he or she may be from, but you've got to create that system, that culture in the organization. It's not easy, but unless you do it, you're not going to get to that next stage. So we got to look at talent a little differently from a whole system perspective. And being entrepreneurs, being leaders, it's our responsibility to bring the best out of that talent.
I think India has always inherently been one of the most creative it's the most creative community in the world, and I think we've lost that sense of creativity in the past century. Go to our 1,000-year-old temples. Go to the Meenakshi temples where you can play a note of every single instrument in the world on the pillars by just like knocking your hands on them. We've created some of the most beautiful frescoes. We have the most beautiful folk music. We have the most beautiful instruments. And I think that sense of creativity somewhere has been lost. I don't know why. Maybe it's always been downsized and not given the kind of value that it deserves. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with Caring with Color, is to integrate the arts with education and to teach kids through the arts. And I think Viraj is very creative, even if he hasn't studied at an art school, because I think to design any product or any kind of technology requires a great deal of creativity. And even for YY Noodles, to expand it and to think of innovative ways of expanding it and thinking of entrepreneurship and creating entrepreneurs and innovators requires a huge amount of creativity. Yeah.
Let me tell you that India, I feel, has the greatest talent pool.
Good. That's nice to know.
It actually, yeah, because I deal with it probably every day. Before coming to India, I was in Dubai for 10 years. And I was in a sort of not a mundane, but I was into real estate.
Sure.
And in Dubai, the pace at which real estate was growing was unrealistic.
Right.
That's why the whole house of cards came crashing down. And now I'm coming to your question. What we need to realize is we need to have our fundamentals in place first. So before starting any venture, I at least take 6 months to a year to properly study the model, the market, and then gradually get the best suited talent to implement my idea.
Sure.
And while at the implementation stage, we first do a prototype. And we do the whole trial and error method in that prototype till we are in that scale platform, mode. So managing people, managing your partners, managing the brand, because one little mistake could dilute the mother brand.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's something which we have to be cognizant of all the time. Because that's the brand which not I created, which my forefathers created. And it takes 1 minute, I think everybody sitting here is a journalist, because you have a phone and a camera, you'll just click it and upload it on Facebook or whatever. That's why the whole thing was viral.
Right.
So it's so competitive and sensitive now to do business that we have to be careful of every single step we take.
Sure. Huge responsibility on the shoulders. Happy to take some questions in the house. Ladies and gentlemen, yeah, we have a question right there.
Hi everyone, this is Vivek here from DexLab Analytics. So it's my own enterprise into big data and analytics trainings and solutions.
Sorry, can you be a bit louder? Cannot really hear you.
Am I audible now?
And what's the question?
So yeah, this is much audible.
Okay, this is Vivek here. I have my own enterprise. We are into big data, analytics, solutions, and training providers. And I happen to come from a family business background into trading as well as manufacturing. And one of you rightly pointed out that generation 1 starts it, generation 2 grows it, and generation 3 probably destroys it. I happen to be the 3rd generation. And I just could not get into my family business. As much I would like to support my family into it. My question to you would be, so the challenge I faced was, it was a 2-level challenge. Firstly, it's not easy to go back to your family business coming from a family business, because there are a lot of bottlenecks, especially when it's a joint family business. So how does one penetrate into your own parents' heads and your uncles or whoever is there in the family business to help them understand that whatever they're doing, it can be done better, more innovatively, and more process-orientedly? Because they're just not ready to break it down. They want to do it by themselves on their own. I don't know how much of a challenge you guys must have faced into that. And secondly, then there are people who've been, which is amazing. I don't get people who work with my organization for 10, 15, 20 years. My parents surprisingly happen to have that. How do you get them to put to work with that new energy, or how do you keep them motivated? Because a good thing is they treat their organization as if it's their own, but they do not work like it's their own organization. So eventually, how do you put them into work as well? initially dealing with the parents first and then moving on to them.
I think all three of you should take it up in some sense.
Okay. So thank you that you're from the same generation. You know, every father at the back of his head will never ever praise his son. He'll always say that you're wrong. You know, that's where he makes sure that, you know, we strive into constantly challenging ourselves and proving him wrong. So the whole idea of trust is something which we need to, trust and assurance is something which we need to give him. Now, like I said, my father essentially has come from a traditional business setup. So he's also in the mode of adapting to the whole new, you know, data
Digital
analysis, whatever you're doing. In fact, that's something which we are also getting into now. So even he is aware that if we are not able to adapt to this changing environment, our businesses will also come down like the house of cards. Like, look at what has happened to Kodak. Look at what has happened to Nokia. I mean, even for our group, we have about 120 odd hotels under our ownership and brand. But look what Oyo has done, what Airbnb has done. They don't have a single room which they own, and they are the largest inventory of hotel rooms in the world. So I think all our families also, you know, they are aware that what's going on in the world. So it's about making them realize that what we are doing is not stupid, and what we are doing is something which will only catapult the whole vision of the group.
So one is our parents, which I think Varun's answered. The other question I believe you asked was, how do you change this, the mindset of people who have been working in the organization for the past 15, 20 years? Was that one of your questions? That, I think, was more difficult than trying to convince your parents.
Yes.
And I think that only comes with A, patience, B, not trying to tell them that you know more or better than they know, because we also don't. They've been in the industry for far longer than we have, and they have witnessed all kinds of change. And this is just another kind of change that you want them to adapt to. And I think for professionals working in a company for a long period of time, the only thing that would convince them, through my experience, is numbers and actually showing them like proof of concept. So if you want to develop change, you develop it, and then you have to convince them by showing them that through numbers and through statistics that what you have done is successful. And I think it's only then when I think that's the only way you can convince professionals.
Yeah, I think most of the points are covered, but just to put it in a different way, these two challenges you addressed are very natural, especially as an entrepreneur, either in an existing business or in a new venture. And at both with your family or with your team, change management is something you have to work on. Simple way to look at it is actions speak louder than words. I mean, that's the same point that Manasi mentioned about proof of concept. You need to act the change that you want to see. You need to do it in your everyday behaviors at work and showcase that. Along with that, you should also communicate, especially with the team. I mean, I've worked on sort of change management of 1,000 people organization, so I realized repetitive communication was very important. Even though you may think like, I've said it before, so people will remember it, it's not that easy. I mean, you will remember what you know very well, but the people who are listening to you will have a lot of other things in their attention span. So continuous communication, continuous actions is very essential to drive the change.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, good evening. This is Sunil. I wanted to ask one question about the fight within yourself, all of you, that you have. You know, there are so many noises around the world today. You, at your early, very young age of, of your life, you are doing so great. And the point is that, you may get, noises for all around, your social life and then also your other activities. How do you cope up? How do you stay focused? I mean, your parents may oppose something, your friends may say, come on, you have other things to do. And then how you stay focused to your, why I'm asking this is that, if not immediate, say 5 years, 4 years down the line, I would have same with my children. So I would like to know this, how do I, align with them, align with their mindset?
He's made a good point that if you're a startup founder, you have much less noise around you. You don't have much family baggage. You don't have much sort of a social baggage that will come to you. Nobody's sort of looking at you, in terms of saying that, okay, look, let's see what he or she is doing till you've proven a point. But in your case, you may not have that privilege. So how do you constantly fight the war within yourself to be able to prove yourself right and be able to, live in a sort of a situation which a startup founder would not be in?
I think it's not like startup founders don't face a lot of these
They
challenges.
do, but after a certain point of time.
Yeah. So when the important point, it's a matter of perspective and the perspective you hold of the world around you. There's just a lot of noise going on in your own head about what is he or she thinking about this, what is my family thinking, what are my friends thinking. Those are your own noises in your head. So once you understand that, you get less obsessed with it, focus on doing your work and doing it well. That's very important. It requires strength. So I think, you look at your surroundings as a source of strength, your friend circle, your family, your professional network. At different times, different parts of these support systems will be there for you to lean on. Suppose your family is giving you some trouble, you go to your friends and, so on and so forth. But you have to make use of that and look at everybody's, even if they criticize, look at it in a positive way. Look at it as if they care and that's why they're trying to, poke holes or something. But don't let it come over you or overcome you, sorry.
I think what Viraj said is very correct about having perspective. I think the stage that we're all at right now, we already have a head start. So I don't see this as a challenge, I only see it as a privilege. And for me to complain about this, the kind of headspace that we might be in or the noise that we're facing, I think that would be very, we should be more thankful that it exists. Yeah. And I think it's given us a very strong platform and an opportunity for us to decide what we want to do with our lives. And we have a huge and a very strong network to support those interests. Whether it's our parents, whether it's the kind of support systems that our parents have created to support us. So I think it's not about noise, it's not a challenge, there's no negativity that surrounds us, it's only opportunity and it's a great, great privilege.
Let me just say something out of the box. We are in this competitive environment that if we are not aware of our surroundings, there are people out there to outcompete us. Because in today's world, what we must also realize is money is not an issue anymore. Money will follow if you have the idea. Now, for instance, in fact, yesterday I was just sitting with my team and I was trying to set up a brick factory, which is actually 60% less than the normal brick. Not realizing that there are 6 people who've already done it 2 months back. So no matter how much we try to tell ourselves that, sure, we do have a head start or that platform, at the end of the day, there are other people who could be ahead of us. So I think what I do is that I read a lot. You've got newspapers, you've got all the possible digital media on your phone. So that really keeps me informative. And the second thing which I want to come back to is discipline is something which I feel that it's really made me aware of my inner being.
That's a good point that he's made out there, for sure. So I think I've already been sort of given an eye on the time. Before we wrap up, there is these 3 practices that you do as an entrepreneur and as a young entrepreneur. How do you so these are 3 practices which you do within your existing enterprise and your new enterprise as entrepreneurs, which sort of give you the strength and which you feel are your high points, I would say. So if you can share them with us. So I'll start with you, Viraj. 3 practices.
Okay. It's tough to prioritize, but from the top of my head, I'd say one is be truth-seeking. So always try to find new problems. Look at data, look at your results to keep you grounded. Don't be delusional about it. Second would be learn new things every day or on a continuous basis, and learn also by going out of your comfort zone in new situations, new platforms. And third is seek criticism actively from your team. Ask questions so that you have a more honest dialogue or debate, which you should keep alive. So I think these 3 things they take care of the growth and the grounding. Yeah.
I think mine are very simple. The first would be innovating leadership. So I think to be a good leader, you have to innovate your style continuously. Number 2 is humility and never stop learning, because like Varun said and like what Viraj just said, if you have an idea, there's the probability of 10 other people already starting to develop those ideas is very high. So learning constantly. And 3 is be very, very open to failure and embrace failure.
For me, first and foremost is retaining my human capital. These gone are the days when our fathers, used to have one employee who's been there for years and years. These days, people have options. And that's something which we should realize. And for the businesses that I've started and stuff, since the time I've conceptualized, implemented, it's operating, I've always focused on being a part of the team. So the whole employer versus employee mentality is something which we have to do away with. That's number 1. Number 2, which I accept with Manasi, is you have to accept failures. We are not perfect. And it's all about losing is not when you fall down, it's when you refuse to get up. So that's something which keeps me going. And the third thing is retention of the family values and the tradition. It's a fine blend between innovation and family values that keeps the whole group going.
All 3 of you. So, the point that we're trying to make here is that an entrepreneur in the family system is really no different than a startup founder that everybody is sort of looking keenly at. What is more important is that no matter which kind of entrepreneur you are, you have to be disciplined enough about your own businesses. You have to be creative enough about your own organizations. And I think one thing that and I think a lot of people have made this point, inclusive thinking is very important. You really need to be able to create good teams, train your teams continuously, and realize that everybody is ambitious. If you're ambitious, so are your teams. And it's at the end of the day, what really counts is how you're able to pull through all the noise, all the challenges that are going to be there in your business and prove your success. So thank you very much, Manasi, Varun, Viraj, for sharing some wonderful ideas with us. At the end of the day, we Indians are really family people at heart. And if we have a family enterprise already existing, we don't sort of stretch ourselves too away from it. We like to be part of it instead of trying to create a whole new different world altogether. So it's important to have some value, some entrepreneurial styles, which could be a benchmark for everyone. And you really shared with us today over here some good ideas that everybody can take away. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to request our panel members to please remain on the stage. Well, an ocean of perspectives that we got to hear and be a part of. So I'm going to request Ms. JW Marriot to please present these token of gratitude to all of our speakers as well. I'm also going to request all of you to come together for a group photograph. Ritu, if you may please join everyone for a group photograph as well.